Well, good afternoon, and I'd like to welcome old friend Tom Seigner, who is the worst enemy of those who pollute and best friend of those of us who long for clean air and water. Uh, so, Tom, tell me, how did you get interested in the environmental movement or the
Well,
climate change?
well, thanks for the invite, first of all, Steve. And yeah, you're an old dear friend, and we go back close to half a century, and that's saying something.
Yeah.
I've always done a little bit of environmental work, a Sierra Club, building trails, Habitat for Humanity, stuff like that. It's just always been in my DNA a little bit. And about 5 years ago, I decided to back off work quite a bit uh, and commit myself more heavily to what a lot of people consider the most pressing problem the world now faces, and that's climate change. And so that's what I've spent the last 5 years doing. And I run a chapter up here in Ventura County, and I'll give you the 10,000 foot version about what we're about. The Citizens Climate Lobby actually started in your own backyard on Coronado Island. And that's where the corporate office, so to speak, is. And over the 12 years we've been active, we've grown from, a very, very small chapter, started out in San Diego, to something like 264 chapters in the United States, covering virtually every congressional district, plus another 150 chapters or so overseas. And our mission is meaningful climate legislation. Um, we do it through, we get the word out through showing up at Earth Day events and festivals and any kind of venue we can think of where we can, get the word out. We meet with our legislators, meaning for the most part, our U.S. representatives, Congress people. We meet with them in Washington, D.C. We meet with them locally here and their district offices. We write letters to the editor. We get endorsements from prominent entities. And, we've got our own radio station, and we've got something like about 200,000 active members right now. Um, we are There's a lot to be done with respect to climate change, Steve. A million things that need to be done, but our focus is fairly laser focused on something called a carbon fee, and I think a lot of people have probably heard about that. There's a lot to it, uh, but uh, but if you look at and you study this, you'll find that uh, the scientific community is behind this. Nobel laureate economists are behind this. And we're now pushing a bill in Congress that's got the backing of 74 members of Congress right now, H.R. 2307. Um, and uh, Hopefully things are going to come to fruition pretty quick after 12 years of hard work. So,
Certainly hope so. And that would be through this reconciliation process.
exactly, exactly. I mentioned we have 74 members of Congress supporting this bill. Unfortunately, they're all Democrats. We consider ourselves a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We do have chapters that focus on talking to conservatives and the message that is meaningful to them as well. We did actually have a couple of conservatives on our bill in the last session of Congress, but they were either not reelected or retired. So right now the bill gets reintroduced like all bills do every congressional session, and it's in the last couple of months we've gone from one or two sponsors to 74 co-sponsors. So it's got a lot of support
From the Democrats.
from the Democrats, but also, believe it or not, if you look at endorsers, the U.S. Conference of Mayors endorses us. So you can't get much more conservative than that. I think it's just the political pressure that the extreme right brings to the table that is causing a lot of people on the right from a lot of legislators from the right on jumping on board. But if you talk to them one-on-one in their own district offices, you find that a lot of them really believe that this is something that is meaningful. In fact, it's a capitalistic market-based approach to solving this issue. The one thing conservatives do not like, and a lot of people don't like, is a lot of heavy-handed regulation that requires tremendous amounts of oversight, telling you how you need to do something. And this particular approach is quite market-based, and it lets people make up their own minds how they're going to respond. Uh, and when we talk about a carbon tax, I think the first thing that comes to most people's mind is higher gasoline prices, and that's the most obvious thing, and that's true. But the way the bill works, particularly with respect to what your issues are, which is these are social justice issues, the bill does provide for that aspect, understanding that when you start raising the price on anything, it's normally the people at the lower income levels who are usually harmed the most. So that's a big focus of ours, and we believe it's a big focus of President Biden's as well.
And just exactly how do you address in this legislation some protections or mitigations for the uh, lower income folks?
Well, there's a lot of things that need to be done in the reconciliation bill, and ours is one piece of it. But in its simplest form, the way I can explain it is, as the price of fossil fuels, think gas, that's what most people will think about, gasoline, increases and increases dramatically over the next 10 years. All that money that's collected by virtue of these fees imposed on fossil fuel producers at the wellhead, all coil and gas. That's an acronym.
Uh-huh.
Uh, all that money virtually, or 97% of it, is returned to the public in the form of a dividend check every month. Just like you get a Social Security check if you're a retired person, and you and I both know what that's about. So just like your Social Security check rolls in every month, you would get a dividend check every month. And based on studies done again by Nobel laureate economists and others, 70%, on average, 70% of the lowest wage earners in the United States would be made whole by virtue of this dividend. And as it keeps raising, as gas prices keep raising, so the dividend keeps raising. And so it allows people to pay for the higher costs of gasoline with those dividend checks. And when I talk about a market-based approach, what this allows people to do is see what's happening. It is gas prices are going up. So what do you do in response to that? Well, you get a more economical car, you get a hybrid, you get an electric, um, and that's the direction you start to think in. Transportation, hopefully, this giant infrastructure bill that is coming forth will deal with our transportation needs as well. So we mitigate, the financial burden placed on the less economically fortunate by virtue of these dividend checks coming back. That's one piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what about uh, now you talk about the Nobel laureates, and so this is really all based on sound data as opposed to an ideological approach.
Yeah, exactly. Our organization is science-based, so it's got to, first you need to get the scientific community on board, people like the Union of Concerned Scientists and other like-minded scientific organizations to say a carbon tax will work. Every country has an Academy of Climate Science. Virtually every country does. There may be a couple that don't, but I'm not aware of them. 100% of these countries say that we need to do something about lowering the fossil fuels that are pumped into the air. and that a carbon tax is essential to be part of that solution. So we've got the scientific community, hands down, is behind this thing. As far as the social justice part, we spoke about that briefly. As far as economists go, well, again, you can talk to 1,000 economists and get 1,000 different answers. But the bottom line is that we've got our bill is endorsed by, not our bill, but the bill that we support is endorsed by no less than 27 Nobel laureate economists. So and again, I'd mentioned the union, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. So you've even got some conservatives saying that, that we like this idea simply because it lets people make choices. It doesn't require a lot of heavy Washington bureaucracy. It will fly by reconciliation rules in terms of something that qualifies to be offered under reconciliation. So that's also good news.
Sounds like very good news. Now, we talked a little bit. Numbers can bore people very quickly. Others might be excited by numbers.
Yeah.
I put myself in the category of being happy to know the numbers are there, and trusting folks with the credentials. But so we will be able, on the resource page of the podcast, I'm going to invite you to send me maybe the Climate Lobby website, or any independent studies that you can't find on the website that you think would be helpful for those who are interested more in the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Steve. I will send you that information. I could do it in the chat, but I can't multitask. I can't
yeah.
at the same time. But you're right. I think it's important for people to see, people that are interested in terms of the science of it a little bit. Our website is enormous, and it's got a lot of resources. So I'll be pretty specific about trying to point you in the right direction in our website.
Okay, well, let's just let the folks know now, and know that I will post a link to the website in the resource section. But what is the website?
Well, you can go to, if you just Google citizensclimatelobby.org.
Citizensclimatelobby.org.
It'll pop right up. And like I said, it's a very thorough website. I've spent 5 years wandering around it myself, and it's got everything you need to know. Beautiful. But I'll try and provide some helpful hints on uncovering what you're suggesting your listeners would like to hear.
Great. Now, I must say that, on the substance level, the one thing that concerns me, and I suspect concerns to the extent it's just not contrary to something that Biden and the left wing wants to impose on further imposition on our freedoms. What happens to the heaviest polluters, who would have to pay a heavy tax, in terms of employment? Is there any discussion of how these costs might affect employment in fields?
I think that's a great question, and I think where we should start is by saying that we recognize that people who have worked in these industries, coal, oil, and gas, will need to make a transition, and that should be. We should see some of that in Biden's infrastructure bill, and we should see some of it in the reconciliation bill. But I think we should see quite a bit of it in the infrastructure bill coming forth. These people have worked hard. In some jobs, they risk their life in this business, and they need to be provided for in terms of helping to make the switch to renewables. There's no doubt that renewables are growing at a tremendous rate, and they're good paying jobs, and there's millions of them out there, and There's no reason why these people who have worked so hard can't be helped with this transition. And quite frankly, the companies they work for, if they're smart, they will get on board with this too. I mean, they're in the energy business, and renewable energy is just another form of energy. So they can play, our major fossil fuel producers can play a major role in helping us make this transition to a clean environment. So it's not in our bill, but we should see a lot of it happen in the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill as well. Another thing we need to pay attention to is as the prices of oil dramatically increase and the prices of manufacturing goods dramatically increases, goods that are made with maybe oil-based products, um, are we going to become less competitive overseas? Within our own country, it's one thing, but overseas, it's another. Well, there's another thing our bill includes, and that includes as a border tax, which means that as we're importing goods from um, other countries who don't have similar actions in place with respect to carbon taxes and making a transition to a renewable energy environment, there will be tariffs imposed on goods being imported. Um, so that should protect our manufacturing base here. As far as us then exporting goods overseas, we need to get on board with this because right now the European Union has passed into their own law a carbon tax with a border fee adjustment, which means that if we don't have the same thing in place, our goods are going to become more expensive to export. So if we do the smart thing and join up with the European Union, that then puts tremendous pressure on the rest of the world, China and anyone else that has a big carbon footprint to do something similar. The economics just make sense.
Yeah, I think that aspect of the process is, uh, really gets down to the viability of having meaningful change because it is a global problem and
Yeah.
we can do a lot for ourselves, but the problem is, we need India, we need China, and we need Pakistan,
Yeah.
and all the emerging nations, most in the Mid East and in this, southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
If it's gonna, work. One thing I'm curious about, and I have no idea if you'd be familiar with how this fits into the Paris Accords. Is there provision in the Accords for the carbon tax or some form of carbon?
You know what? The answer is the big answer is I don't know, but I do know that if we pass HR 2307, that basically gets us, based on all the projections, that gets us to where we need to be. Just this one bill alone gets us pretty much where we need to be in terms of the Paris Accords.
Okay.
In terms
And,
of,
you
yeah,
know, it seems to me that, during the last presidential campaign, there was all of that talk about, um, this refinery that was being built to refine the uh, substance that comes out of the ground through fracking.
mhm,
And that, a statement made by somebody referred to all of those people in that key state losing their jobs.
yeah,
And but I mean, it's nuts. I see oil companies spending more money touting their efforts to fuel the nation with alternative and reusable sources
Mhm.
more than mostly because of the amount of money they have to advertise, but they advertise for it more than the energy lobbies.
Well,
Uh,
that's you've just hit a touch point, and the oil companies and fossil fuel producers until now have been really good about what we call greenwashing in terms of all the stuff they're doing to make this a more livable planet. The fact is they haven't. And the fact is they're still their way, some of these companies, their way of adapting to this change is to build more petrochemical plants and produce more plastics. And they're spending billions doing that. So they're invited to the table. We want them to be part of the solution. They can be part of the solution, a big part of it, but they need to think ahead because this change is coming. The economics demand the change. I mean, coal is absolutely dead in the United States. It's not competitive. Even natural gas is, who some have touted as a nice bridge fuel. It's still dirty as hell, and it's becoming marginally competitive with wind and solar. And as that technology continues to increase and expand, natural gas is going to get pushed out. So you can get on board and or not and be part of the solution and keep your companies viable and keep your employees working only in cleaner jobs, or just stand aside. Um, it's when you talked about fracking a minute ago, Steve, and here's an example. Part of the reason our fuel is so cheap is because it's cheap at the pump, but it's not cheap in terms of the toll it takes on the environment. Okay. What a lot of people don't know is there's a cost, and we call it a social justice cost or a social cost. If you're living next to a freeway, if your kid's got asthma, if you're next to a manufacturing plant manufacturing cement that's heavily carbon intensive, um, if you look at what the people in the fracking industry and the oil industry have walked away from in the last 30, 40 years, we now have something like 3 million uncapped fracked wells, oil wells, gas wells that have used up their use in terms of production, that these producers of these fossil fuels have literally walked away from and not lived up to their promise to cap these wells, or they were able to scoot by because of lenient local legislation that let them scoot by and not cap these wells or not provide a sufficient bond. We're talking about $40 billion on the backs of you and me and every other taxpayer to cap these wells. So when you talk about cheap gas, it's not cheap. It's costing us to clean this mess up, just like the Superfund sites were and still are.
yeah. I think I read somewhere that the Chinese, who are much better at long-term planning than we are,
Yep.
uh, have recognized those costs. And for every dollar of growth based on um, uh, coal or fossil fuel energy has a $5 cost anticipated to clean it up. So,
Yeah.
$1 forward and $5 back, forgetting the fact that if you have the misfortune, for a whole lot of reasons, to be born in Beijing, you wake up today with something close to a 6-year deficit on your lifespan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I mean, what cost is that? How do you figure that out?
Well, you've just made the argument, and properly so, about what the world needs to do. And by us implementing a carbon fee uh, and dividend approach with a border tax, along with the EU, it puts tremendous pressure on China to do the same thing. Now, China is a mixed bag right now. They are still
Yeah,
building fossil fuel plants, coal-fired power plants. At the same time, they are the world leader in terms of building renewables. Uh, but they need to receive the message that if they want to be economically competitive, they need to stop building those coal-fired power plants
yeah,
and come around. Now, a lot of people I talk to always point to China and say China is the biggest polluter on the planet. You know what? These people are right. But here's the story. China releases twice the pollution we do, but they've got 4 times the population.
yeah,
So per capita,
right.
we release twice as much pollution per capita per person as China does. Per capita, we're the biggest polluter in the world. Uh, but China is coming on and coming on strong in terms of their industrialization. And they need to be part of this mix. Between us and the EU and China, you're talking about a gigantic footprint. India, believe it or not, for as big a country as they are, because of their lack of infrastructure in general, they are not in the top 3 or 4 anywhere close to it. I think we're going to see in India is they're going to jump, they're going to make the leap ahead without having wasted a lot of time on uh, fossil fuels like we did and Europe did and China has. So if you can get the EU and the US and China on board, all doing the same thing and shaking their head in the same direction,
Yeah,
you got a win-win there.
yeah, it sure sounds like it. Now, one of the things that I grapple with is when you talk about the future and economic impacts, uh, you really have to. I'm asking this question. Don't you
Okay.
have to uh, separate short term from midterm from long term so that it doesn't all get inflated? I think that a lot of the people that I talk to about this say, "Oh my God, what kind of turmoil is this?" Because you do that, and everything goes out of whack, and people lose jobs, and companies can't make money, and but whoever and whatever we do, it's a process, is it not? I mean,
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
is no way. Yeah,
I,
go.
I can give you one great example. California is the biggest agricultural state in the union and probably the breadbasket of a lot of the world. And I meet with farmers locally in Ventura County. It's a couple of $1 billion industry just in Ventura County alone. And I've met with in addition to the local farmers, I met with the president of the local farm bureau and in joint meetings with our local congressperson. And there's no doubt that they need help making this transition. Farming, for the most part, doesn't get you rich, unless you sell your property, to a developer who builds
Yeah,
4,000 houses on it. But they need help in this transition. And there are a lot of other bills that are now in Congress that hopefully will support farmers in terms of helping them make the transition to get away from using chemicals and depleting their earth. Farmers really need to start with bringing back the soil and instead of depleting it through the use of toxic chemicals. Because once you go down that road, you're hooked and you're into it, and it's hard to get out from under it. So there is a bill in Congress right now. It's called the um, uh, I think it's called the uh, Global Climate Solutions Act. I'm not sure about that, but I'll send you that. But anyway, what it does is it provides financial markets and support for farmers to to make the transition to more regenerative, sustainable types of farming. Um, and in our bill as well, uh, it provides financial support or credits for farmers in terms of the additional cost of fossil fuels they will use, those increased cost of fossil fuels that they'll use in producing the products that they produce. So our bill does take into account the farming community, but there's a lot more that needs to be done with the farming community. They really need to be brought along. The incentives are all the wrong way. Here, you talk about it's a world being topsy-turvy. Do you know in California and probably around the country, about 80% of the produce we eat is manufactured somewhere outside of the country. And approximately 80% of the produce that we produce is eaten by someone outside of our country.
Outside
Now,
the country or outside of California?
outside the country,
Whoa.
in some cases, 90%, depending on the type of produce you're talking about, especially product you're talking about. So you talk about a topsy-turvy world. So there's a lot of things that need to be happen. I'm not an expert on that, but I know enough about it, and meeting with the local farmers to know that that's a real problem. We need to start eating what we actually grow. You know, I mean, that's
Be a novel idea.
yeah, it'd be a novel idea, and the one of the few places on the planet where we have it's a literal breadbasket. So incredible.
It's amazing. And, coming from being born and raised in Nebraska and, have a lot of family back there. So we're back there all the time. It really is a shame that the family farm has become, a very risky business. It just is, um,
Yeah,
it's a way of life. And, collectively, their share of the market, as opposed to the conglomerates,
yeah,
shrinks every year.
yeah,
And uh, I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable with a very few number of people controlling the
yeah,
overwhelming majority of what we eat.
yeah,
That's
yeah. You're. I didn't grow up in Nebraska, but you know quite well, having known me this long, that you knew my wife before I knew my wife, who also grew up in Nebraska. I also have friends, believe it or not. My business partner's family owns a large farm in Nebraska. They grow corn, and you hit it on the spot. They are beholden. A lot of these farmers in the Midwest, these big monocrop farmers, are beholden to the government for subsidies. It's basically like being on the dole, and they don't
yeah,
like it. They don't like it any more than you or I would. And so that's got to change. And these are the people that this bill I was talking about, and I did remember the name of it. It's called the Growers Climate Solutions Act, and it was just passed by the Senate recently, 92 to 10, 92 to 8. Where do you ever
wow,
get the Senate voting 92 to 8 on anything? But it did. It's now in the House, and it's expected to fly by the House. And so we're cheering that on. We do support a lot of bills other than the one that we favor as being one of the big solutions to this global warming problem. So we do pay attention to other bills when we meet with Congress people, and if we think it'll do the world some good in terms of the environment, uh, we tout those bills as well. So yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
Uh, it's such a complex problem.
yeah,
And so, uh, uh, until we get together. Now, I'm hoping it looks like that bipartisan infrastructure bill, the one that they're agreeing to,
yeah,
is actually going to be bipartisan. I
yeah,
heard this morning there were 17 Republican senators that have signed on to it.
yep, yep.
And to me, that is really encouraging. I mean,
Well, based on the way things work these days, it is very encouraging. There were days gone by when 17 didn't look like a big bipartisan bill, but now if you've got a bill that's got 50 50 of one party on it and two or the other, we call it bipartisan, and it
right.
technically is. But you know where we're at these days. But it's good. It's good to see something like that happening. It really
Oh,
is.
yeah. I think it's really great. Um, All right. Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and folks, faithful listeners, there will be a letter which Tom wrote to me, and I sent out to many of you. That really requires immediate action. And it's very simple. Even a computer phobic old fart like me did it. And actually, you told me it would take a minute. It took less.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
and you can have your senators written, called by just pressing these buttons as directed in this letter.
Yeah.
And if you believe, as we do, that it's something who, information we're spreading, send it to your friends and your family. And I know a lot of the folks who are getting it are in the restorative community. I'm guessing that at least 95 or more percent of my brothers and sisters in arms will be in of like mind, and send it to your friends and family. Send out as many as you're comfortable with, and let's see how maybe a grassroots movement will actually help move the Neanderthals in Congress. Uh, and I'm trying to be politically correct. Other words come to mind, which
Yeah.
don't. And then the one thing we talked about a little, I mean, we've got kids that get it. My granddaughter, 10 years old, you know what she's doing this summer? She
What?
is researching and writing a paper on the challenge was to come up with what you think are the two best sources of renewable energy, best as in efficient and clean. And she has come up with geothermal and harnessing the energy of the ocean wave. And I mean, she and her friends get it. They
Yeah.
want themselves to breathe clean air. They want clean water. And I really think that, this is in large measure a problem caused by us old folks that have not only screwed the environment up, but whole lots of other things. We've got kids coming along that I'm very hopeful will be engaged in change. I just hope that they're dealt a hand that gives them a real opportunity to have an impact, because I think that, from what I hear, that window is closing pretty quickly. If we don't do something, uh, never doubt the ingenuity of man, but it could be a lot tougher the longer we go on,
Yeah,
as I
I think
understand it.
you summed it up quite well. It's never too late, but the sooner we start, the better.
Yeah.
And Juan, thanks for having me on. Steve, thanks for sending a message out to so many of your friends. I appreciate it. And for those that want to do more than and just contact our senators, uh, Citizens Climate Lobby has a couple of chapters in your neck of the woods for sure. Again, that's where they started. So I'd encourage people who want to play a more active role to look into us
Yeah.
and see
I
if
also understand there are groups for the younger kids, like 14 to
yeah,
20.
yeah, we're a lot of us are retired, are retired folks because we have time on our hands to work on this. But we actually have in our own connected with our own chapter, we actually have a youth group that involves about 30 or 40 young folks, and they intermix with us at our chapter. We get involved and mix with them. We kind of provide them with some guidance, but let them run their own show.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we've had more than one of them as a lead speaker with our member of Congress. The word really comes across when you're talking to somebody who's 16 or 18 years old,
Yeah.
uh, uh, because they've got all this to look forward to, and they'd like to have a little better future than is being anticipated at this moment.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Tom, I thank you. And as things go on, maybe we can check in again, and because I'm sure there's always going to be more to do. And I wish you bon voyage. You are going out to enjoy the fresh air that you're going on a backpacking trip.
I am. I've been with the Sierras, and that's I've done that for well over 50 years now. And you're right. I'm going to get up there around 11, 12, 13,000 feet, and it is cleaner up there.
Yeah.
But, and I'd
There's
like to,
also less oxygen.
yeah. Well, we move pretty slow, but I'd like to pass that on to the next
Yeah,
generation after that. So that's what it's about.
that is. Well, I thank you, and I wish you a good trip. Are you going with a group or?
Just me and I'm taking my business partner, just the two of us. He's a bit of a novice, but he's younger and stronger than I am, so that won't be a problem. But I'm going to have to maybe show him the ropes in terms of where he has to go poop. You know.
Education of a rookie. Maybe that should be
Yeah,
the subject of
exactly,
a
exactly.
podcast in the future. All right. Well, have a great time. And God, when was the last time we were actually together? I'm trying to.
Oh boy, I think it's probably pre-COVID, and
Geez,
so it's probably been, my guess is, year and a half to two
year
years,
and a
and
half.
but we'll make it
Wow.
happen soon. If a few more people get their immunizations, we'll let our social directors handle that. But I'll look
Yeah,
forward to
as they
seeing
always do.
you.
Yeah.
You bet.
Okay. Take care, Tom. Thanks for
Okay.
your time.
Thank you, Steve. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.